Well, welcome back and thanks for joining me for afternoon tea today. We're picking up Psalm 119 at verse 49 and we're going to read through to verse 56. Now, a little bit like the situation yesterday, we find the psalmist again in trouble. He's suffering, he's struggling, but this time specifically it's because he's getting mocked for being a believer. Have a look there in verse 51. The arrogant mock me unmercifully, but I do not turn from your law. And again in verse 53 he says, indignation grips me because of the wicked who have forsaken your law. He's surrounded by people who couldn't give two hoots about God or God's word. And that really churns him up. That makes life really difficult for him. There's peer pressure on him, but he's trying to hold his ground. And in this stanza of Psalm 119, he tells us how he does that. Here's his solution. Do you see at verse 49 and then again in verse 52, we have two rememberings. Verse 49, remember your word to your servant, Lord. And then in verse 52, I remember, Lord, your ancient laws, and I find comfort in them. So there's a double remembering. First of all, he asks God to remember his word, and then he says, God, I will remember your word. Now in the Bible, when we read remember, it doesn't just mean to call something to mind. Remember comes with the meaning that you expect someone to act on what they have called to mind. So it's not just about making sure that something is in the forefront, but it's actually a request, and it's usually aimed at God, to ask God that he would intervene, that he would step up, that he would do something, that he would usually intervene to bring deliverance or to save you or rescue you or fix the problem. And that's exactly what he's doing here. He says, God, I'm surrounded by people who make my life really difficult. They don't care about you or your word. Please remember your word to me. And in verse 50, he calls it your promise. So it's probably, he's talking about God's covenant. God's made a covenant with him. And he's asking God not to forget the promises that God has made. Now, the idea is that because he now has asked God to remember and to act, then he, with confidence, in verse 52 can say, well, God, if you're remembering your word, then I can remember your word. And again, not just call it to mind, but he can actually do it. He can action it. And I think you picked that up at the very end of our stanza in verse 56. This has been my practice. I obey your precepts. It's often really hard to obey God's word and put it into practice, especially when you're surrounded by people who will think you are an idiot for doing that. But by the end of the psalm, he's got that real conviction that he's going to hold his ground. He's not going to stray. Because he's remembered that God remembers, he can remember to keep doing God's word too. Even when he's under pressure, look at verse 53. Indignation grips me because of the wicked who have forsaken your law. You see, he's really feeling the strain. It's making him angry, in fact. And yet, even in that pressure cooker environment, have a look at verses 54 and 55. Your decrees are the theme of my song, wherever I lodge. Even in the night, Lord, I remember your name and keep your law. You see, he's got a song to sing. He's got a song to sing wherever it is that he lays his hat, and he's got a song to sing even in the middle of the night. I think the idea of having a song to sing wherever he lodges picks up that idea that he's a sojourner. I mean, he looks around, he says, I don't belong here. I'm surrounded by people who don't care about God or his word. I'm on a journey somewhere else. There's a better place that God has in store. I'm on my way there. But in the meantime, while I wait, while I'm traveling on the road, I've got a song to sing. Even in the middle of the night when everything caves in around me, I've got a song to sing. Now it's interesting, isn't it? Because normally you'd sing a song when you reach your destination, or you'd sing a song in the morning once you know you've made it safely through the night. But he doesn't have to wait. He can sing even in the midst of his hardship, even when nothing seems to be going his way. And it's because of that double remembering in the first 4 verses. When he remembers, when he asks God rather to remember his promise, and then he commits himself to remembering God's promise, that means that he has a song to sing no matter where, no matter when. Well, do you have a song to sing to God? Do you have a song to sing to God at the moment? It might be a song of praise, gratitude, thankfulness for what he's doing in and through you right now. It might be a hard song, a song of lament. Maybe it's a song where you need to cry out and ask for his help. But what you can know, whatever it is that your song may be, is that God has not forgotten you. God has remembered his word. Will you remember his word to you? Because that is the thing that gives the psalmist comfort. It's the thing that helps him persevere even under pressure. Well, tomorrow we're going to pick it up again. We're going to jump ahead a little and we're going to read from verses 65 to 72. So you might want to read ahead for Friday and we'll be back together then. Thanks.